they wreak havoc not only in terms of
Smurf.
health and people's lives, but they can wreak economic havoc as well, which is another thing that many observers have.
Rockin' game. Wait.
Yeah, and it really is a
Yeah, game 4.
between the focus on the epidemiology and the straightforward health concerns and the other concern about the economics and the social implications of people not going to restaurants and closing schools and all the rest.
Those are the first order effects. So the travel industry is being devastated even as we speak, and it's unclear how long that will last. But then we'll begin to have second order effects. So breakdowns in the supply chain and factories not working, and those things begin to happen. This epidemic, should give us a significant.
Jeez.
So that's another whole thing. It's still a little bit early to forecast that. I'm certain about that, but it is the case that major epidemics, definitely the pandemic, definitely played a role in global depression. So I think it's too early to know that for sure, but it's not crazy to think about the economic implications. And incidentally, an economic issue, I'm no expert on it. This is not a demand shock. This is
Dude, so how do you...
a supply shock. So a demand shock is, when a recession due to declining demand, and then a stimulus might work. For example, dropping interest rates is the best reason.
Dude. Oh my God.
More like the average oil prices in the 1970s that many listeners may remember. And that's when you have a shock to the supply, on the supply side.
All right, let's try that again.
Interest rate doesn't really help. So if for the sake of argument, you begin to get disruption in the global supply chain, this could be
Skill 4.
a very difficult thing to address until you get the factories working, producing the goods, distributing them. So it's too early to know for sure what's going to happen in that regard. But I know that many sophisticated observers of this, including many economists and many extremely wealthy individuals who are tracking this, are unsure still what's going to happen.
Except the one thing we can be sure about here is that
On the economic side, I'm sure.
yeah, no, but I mean,
Dude.
sure that the incentives aren't aligned.
Okay, I'm starting to figure it out, I think.
And that's what has been worrying me for now, at least, I would say 2 weeks. The moment I recognize that the health incentives, the reason, say, to close schools, seem fairly straightforward, and yet the economic reasons to keep them open were and are incredibly powerful and pointing in the opposite direction. And, my concern is that because the economic incentives are so powerful, I mean, to just take school closure as one variable. The fact that,
God, dude, how do you... What the fuck?
You have almost every working adult faced with the problem of what to do with their children. How do you get to work? How do you care for your children? Do you homeschool them? Does that cut the workforce more or less in half? I mean, this is just a huge hassle with economic implications. And so the reasons not to have the epiphany that we should close the schools yesterday are legion, and yet the health wisdom of closing the schools has been fairly obvious for some time. We're going to get to lots of specific questions in a minute, but let's just touch this topic of school closure just to get a sense of the problem and microcosm. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, with school closures, we have to make a distinction between reactive and proactive school closures. So let's talk first about reactive school closures. A reactive school closure is a school closure in which there's a case at the school. And when that happens, typically everyone is alarmed and is quite eager and willing to close the school. It sort of makes sense to the man on the street or the woman on the street that, well, there's an epidemic raging and there's a case at the school and we should close the school. The problem is, by the time you do reactive school closures, many analyses show that it doesn't delay the overall epidemic, or doesn't help the overall epidemic very much. For example, an analysis of reactive school closures in the last influenza epidemic in Italy showed that reactive school closures, I think, reduced the epidemic by like 24% or 25%, the ultimate number of people afflicted, which is good, but not as good as you might want. So you can postpone the peak of the epidemic in your community and reduce the number of people ultimately infected if you close schools once someone gets sick in the school. Similar analysis done in Japan found basically the same conclusion. And modeling exercises, or mathematical models, sophisticated models, including a paper published in the journal Nature in 2006, policy of reactive school closure delayed, I'm look the numbers up because I have for a moderately transmissible disease, reduced the cumulative attack rate by about 24% and delayed the peak by about 13 days. So the model and the empirical results of prior school closures in Japan and Italy, which is the literature I'm familiar with, I'm sure the vast literature on this, suggest that reactive school closures help. But the real problem, or the real dilemma, is whether we should have proactive school closure. And this is a much more but from my eyes, something we should be doing, frankly. And the reason is that if you imagine let's not pick a major, let's not pick New York or Miami yet, because that's another whole kettle of fish. Let's pick a mid-sized town.
All right, I'm hitting reset.
If you believe that the moment someone in your school is going to, if you believe that the moment someone in your school gets sick, you are going to close the school. Probably what you really should do is the moment someone gets sick in your community or in what is known as the epidemiologically relevant region. So if you believe that the moment someone gets sick in the epidemiologically relevant region, your town, that it eventually will afflict your school, then the more rational policy is as soon as someone gets sick in your community, shut the school. Why not you're going to shut it anyway in a week, your school's going to be afflicted. But if you jump the gun and you actually might radically improve the course of the epidemic in your community.
Fuck, man.
And there is actually amazing evidence about this. So again, just to crystallize the point, so let's say you set some threshold, and we can discuss what the threshold is, some number of cases in some specified area in your town or in an adjoining town, or a case that you know is not an imported case. It's not like someone flew from Italy to your town and presented this disease. But instead, you find what is known as this community transmission. Someone who has the disease and you don't know where they got it. That means the disease is loose in your community. If you set in the threshold one such case or two such cases in your town or in a nearby town, you could then proactively close your school, and then you have much bigger benefits than the reactive closure.
Right.
And there's a wonderful analysis that was done
do?
of 43 cities in the United States during the 1918 epidemic, which very carefully examined across these cities when did they close their schools with respect to the pace of the epidemic and for how long were they closed. And it found, for example, if you use as a threshold, how far in advance of the epidemic reaching, if you create the standard of you have twice the level of respiratory deaths that you usually have in prior years, you have excess deaths, how far in advance of hitting that twice the amount level did you close your schools? It found that actually districts that closed in advance, proactively, had dramatically lower death rates in the end. And so, for example, there's a comparison between St. Louis and Pittsburgh. St. Louis closed in the 1918 influenza pandemic earlier and longer, and it had less than half the deaths.
5,500.